Welcome back into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It has been a busy week for us at Illini Inquirer with all our football content, but also basketball starting up. And we've had plenty of features, especially on a lot of the newcomers coming up. And we just had Big Ten Basketball Media Day. And let's welcome in Joey Wagner. We're going to preview Wisconsin in this podcast, Joey, but the content is a-flowing with Illini basketball. And I know fans after 2-4 start with football certainly are ready for that. But man, we need a nap. We need a little reprieve, and that's why the off week couldn't come at a better time. But I am so happy after what happened last year. We hadn't even played a football game at this point that we're sitting here like on October 8th, like, man, this is a grind.
Yeah, I like Derek Piper as much as I like anybody. I don't like seeing him at 4:30 in the morning driving to Indianapolis in the what have amounted to end up being like pouring rain. Just a long day yesterday, man. And I'm not afraid to say the setup at Big Ten Media Day stunk, but we got good content out of it. It's fun. It is a grind to go between football and basketball and understand it's a lot of work, but also, dude, this is fun, right? Like, this is the basketball team that's going to be like rock stars here if they're not already soon enough. So it's fun, man. This is what makes this part of this year stressful and a good time, all of it mixed into one.
Yeah, obviously there's different feelings for basketball right now than football. And, I talked to Josh Whitman, got a story posted about that. And I think I'm going to put that into another podcast this weekend. I was able to talk with national media members about Illinois basketball, but also Josh Whitman about basketball, how far that program's come, and kind of some first-year parallels between Brad Underwood and Brett Bielema, where both had excruciating losses, found ways to lose close games, despite having veteran teams, kind of taking over veteran teams, trying to learn how to win. So I'll post that later. But obviously there's a ton of excitement about basketball. And I talked with some national media members, Joey, who are in love with the personnel on this team and kind of frankly surprised at how quickly Brad Underwood has taken this up a notch and how well he's developed some of the good talent, whether it was, I would assume, getting him to a top 40 pick in the NBA, Kofi Coburn becoming one of the best bigs in the country when he was number 12 in his class at center, or Andre Curbelo becoming one of the most flashiest, entertaining players in the country. What have been your big takeaways in our first couple media kind of scrums and opportunities with Illinois basketball?
It's literally that scene in The Office where Creed Bratton says he doesn't give an F about nothing. I mean, honestly, they know where they're at. They know that they still have a ways to go, right? I mean, and Brad has said this before, they haven't done anything to this point. I mean, the furthest they've gone is the second round of the NCAA tournament, but there's just a confidence about them. And I think it's both confidence they have in the team, which they should have. And I think it's just confidence in what it is, right? Like the fundamental parts of this program that Brad and Trent Frazier and DeMonte Williams and Jeff Alexander, and my God, there's not many holdovers, Tyler Underwood from those first parts that was installed. They're just confident in what it is, how it was built, what they're doing. And then, of course, when you put in a second team All-American coming back and probably one of the three best players in college basketball, and Andre Curbelo, who's like getting so much buzz now, like he was at Media Day, obviously, right? But I still think in December or in January, people are going to be like, holy crap, who's this dude? Right? Like, I still think there's
right? Like, I talked with some of these national guys and they're like, I thought I was kind of in early on Andre Curbelo, and, Jeff Goodman I talked to had him as a first team All-American, or Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News said, I thought like I was unique in that I thought he was an all Big Ten first teamer. And everyone loves him. It's because he's so entertaining. He's so good. He played so well down the stretch. I think people see he's different. And I think people know about him regionally, but I don't know if other Big Ten writers with the way they voted are treating him like he's that first team all Big Ten guy. Like, I think he can be maybe a second team at the end of the year. I don't know, but he's a top 10 player in the Big Ten. And nationally, I think some guys know that, but I don't know if everyone knows it, because let's be honest, Joey, Brad Underwood can say that we haven't accomplished enough yet, or maybe he hasn't soaked in everything that he's accomplished so far. They won a Big Ten tournament championship. They won 16 Big Ten games. They've won 29 Big Ten games over the last 2 years. They're one of the best teams in the country. right now. And to get back an All-American for a junior year, to get back Andre Curbelo, and then to have the benefit of getting Trent Frazier and DeMonte Williams back. And I know you're going to do a story on those two, probably underrated with Big Ten writers, national writers, because that just gives you a foundation. I know the buzzword culture is used too often, but it is invaluable to have those guys, whether it's Kofi, DeMonte, Trent, Jacob Grandison, guys who have been there and been through this and know the work ethic it takes to win. That's what Illinois missed after D Brown left, right? So to be able to have extra years of Io, extra years of Kofi, and extra years of Trent DeMonte, I think is really invaluable for Brad continuing this momentum.
I think if you look at Trent and DeMonte, everything you said is 100% true, right? I mean, just it's what Brad, he talked about them being the underbelly of the program and all of this, how much they mean. But think about it, like trickle it down a little bit. And I know these freshmen were 4 stars, right? I understand that. And I think they're good players and they're going to be good players. But Brad doesn't have to lean on them this year. And that is so, and maybe 1 or 2 breaks into the rotation. I don't know. It's August or October 8th. I have no idea what's going to happen in a month or 2 months. But to be able to say, okay, we're going to put a 22-year-old out there and not an 18-year-old out there, that's a very large trickle-down effect for this program. And that's, without those two, now you're suddenly, the conversation we're having is, okay, they've got 2 stars, and, well, hey, what about Coleman Hawkins, or what about Austin Hutcherson? And then what freshman steps up? Who's it going to be? And now that question is, what freshman steps up and adds to what we think they're going to be? And that it just changes the narrative, changes the tenor around what it is. And that's good news for a team that very much plans on dancing for a while.
Yeah, and that's not to ignore some questions about this team, right? If we're talking about, like, I have no doubt this is going to be one of the best teams in the Big Ten. Like 4 for me is like 5 if things don't go exactly right. Of course, that's taking out some significant injury, right? But I just think that the floor of this team is so high with a guy like Kofi, especially. I just think he's worth like a +6 or 7 WAR when it comes to him returning. I just think he's the great equalizer. Like, I think Andre is the exciting guy and is definitely a floor leader. And he's going to have to take over closer responsibilities in a different kind of role as a distributor, right? Than Io, who's a scorer at the end of games. So that's a big question. But like, Kofi is the great equalizer when you're going up against Purdue and their great big man, or fan favorite Hunter Dickinson in Michigan. Like, Hunter's a great player, but Kofi can wipe him out. We've seen that. And I don't know if he'll have quite as dominant a performance against Hunter Dickinson, but when you can go into a game and think your big man is a huge advantage or completely wipes out the other guy on the other team in a conference full of great bigs, that's just an invaluable piece of the puzzle. But then, Joey, we also have 2 pieces that are a couple pieces that are X factors with this team. And that includes Alfonso Plummer, who I don't think is as complete of a player as Adam Miller will be this year. I think Adam Miller is going to have a really good year at LSU. He's really good defensively.
How
and
dare
I think,
you?
and I think he'll take another step offensively. Listen, I think he's really good. And I think Illinois would have been better if Adam Miller comes back. But Alfonso Plummer gives them another shooter where they're going to get out and run. They're going to shoot a bunch of threes this year. When you have a lineup that could include Andre Curbelo, Trent Frazier, Plummer, Grandison, right, Hutcherson, whatever it is. I have some defensive questions about that group. And that's why it'll be interesting to see these rotations. But then Coleman Hawkins and Omar Payne with Kofi back become kind of an embarrassment of riches potentially in the front court, along with Jacob Grandison and DeMonte Williams, where you have some flexibility. You can play different ways. And I do think they'll go through some early figuring it out struggles. They could drop a game, Joey, that we don't expect, because Brad Owens was trying to figure out who's the best groups to play together. But I do think it's great to have a bunch of options where you can go so many different ways.
Yeah, and we're talking about this Illinois team as highly as we are, justifiably so, right? Hey, 2 of us have an office mug. But I got the boom roasted here.
Oh, I got just Dwight Bears beat.
That is going to be so mad hearing that interruption. So we're talking about this team, and we should, for as high as they are, but they lost one of the best players in program history, right? Io DeSumo, and Adam Miller, who was really stinking good as a freshman. And I know maybe fans have sour grapes over the Adam Miller experience and transfer. The dude was going to help the team this year in a pretty meaningful way. So we're looking at this. I just want to put that out there in the context of like, whoa, there's some talent on this team when the expectations are where they are, but also those are pretty significant losses. I mean, they just are. So it's really this roster. There's a lot that we know, but exactly to what you said, the unknowns, or I guess moderately unknowns. Like, I think we have a pretty good idea of what we think Jacob Grandison and Austin Hutcherson can be. Those are the two I come back to all the time, right? Is like, if you get pretty solid play out of those two, well, now you've really got some dudes out there, and that's pretty impressive. And then of course Omar Payne, there's just a lot there, a lot that we think could be good, but how is it going to all play in? And then one of the bigger questions Derek and I talked about on the way to Indianapolis, and you and I talked about when we were there, and we asked Brad, and I don't know that I completely, just because we don't know, especially on Hutcherson, that I completely buy right now, is who's the backup point guard?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I do think we've seen Trent Frazier with that ability. I think Austin Hutcherson could be that. But remember, last year it's like, go, Andre, go, go, go. And he really was a jet engine for them at times. So there are, now we're getting really deep in the woods here.
Yeah, no, but right? I think this is a good thing, because like we're talking about all the great things, and I think that gives them such a high floor and a high ceiling. I think some of the smaller nitty gritty things are, how does this group defend? Right? Like, are they as good defensively? I think Kofi gives you a high floor defensively. And I think this is I think it's time to talk about this staff and Brad Underwood. And I think Jeff Alexander clear has been a part of this. And I think we know Chester Frazier and Tim Anderson know basketball pretty well. They are really good development guys. And you got a lot of guys behind the scenes still, like Neil Ganta, right? Now, Tyler Underwood is back with this group, that I think have been a part of some of these big changes that they've made and adjustments to their personnel, where I think they'll figure it out at some point. But I do think in the early going, they got some things to work through. And one of those would be, who's your secondary creator, right? Because we know Andre Curbelo is going to be on the court 30 plus minutes. Those 10 other minutes, sure, I'm not worried about who's going to bring the ball up the court, right? Like, I think we know Trent Frazier is capable of doing that. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's a fine ball handler. Like Alfonso Plummer or Austin Hutcherson can do that. To me, it's who creates for others, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where you're going to have to run more sets. You're going to have a lot of shooters on the court if it's Trent Frazier, Austin Hutcherson, Alfonso Plummer, Jacob Grandison, DeMonte Williams, right? But who's going to create? And I wonder, is it more of somebody at the elbow? Because Jacob Grandison's a heck of a passer. Coleman Hawkins can pass pretty well. The other guy that needs to be a much better passer is Kofi Cockburn, right? Because you get the ball to Kofi, people are collapsing on him, right? And that's a huge weakness for Kofi, and why the NBA wanted him to go back is to see him become a better passer. Because I don't mind when Kofi's a black hole sometimes, because who's stopping him, right? The gravitational force of Kofi, he's going to get the ball in the hoop. But at some points, he does need to pass the ball. And I think Loyola took advantage of that at times. And I think teams, that's what they'll try to do, is just try to make sure Kofi can't pass it to somebody else or beat you one-on-one, double team him, and then he could force up a bad shot, or you get him to the free throw line. Like those are the little things that this team's going to have to figure out.
And here's something I've been thinking about a little bit, and I don't know how much merit there is to as much thought that I've put into it here, is we think Andre Curbelo is going to be good. Like, he was very flashy last year. He was very, I mean, there were times that he was just really, really, really good last year. But we're also kind of talking about a pretty significant freshman to sophomore step and what we think he's going to be. I mean, I think there's every bit of reason to believe he's going to take that step. And I'd probably be more shocked if he did not take that step. But is that not a large step? I mean, we're talking about a guy who was a sixth man last year, and a good one at that. And now you have people, and again, I understand it. I probably lean towards agree with them, talking about this dude being a first team or second team All-American. Like, that is a significant step forward.
We're projecting the Cassius leap, right? I mean, that's kind of who I've compared him to. He's like, Derek uses the Tony Parker, but in Big Ten sense, I think they're different players, but like similar come in, make an impact off the bench, and then the next year kind of take over the team. Cassius went from 6.7 points, 5.2 assists, kind of similar to Andre. Andre scored a little bit more, didn't have as many assists. Then the next year, 12.6, 6.9 assists. That sounds about right for Andre Curbelo, right? Maybe he can score a little bit more. Maybe the assists are one lower or whatever it is. But I can see that the difference is Cassius Winston shot 50% from three his sophomore year. And that's can Andre get to 30? Can Andre be more Tracy Abrams than Jalen Tate from three? That's what they need.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to look at some of like how his 3-pointers came about, where they catch and shoot. How did that? I need to look into that a little bit more here. But Cassius, I actually was frantically looking for paper and pen to write that down when I inevitably start writing about Andre Curbelo here. But yeah, that's a really good comp. And again, I don't want anyone to hear this and think, oh, they don't think Curbelo is going to make the league. I do think that. But I think if you're on the
preseason, all Big Ten.
Yeah, but I also think like if you're on the outside, like let's say you're in Maine, right? And you're like, oh boy, really people expecting him to make this that's a significant leap. And I just think we have to address that. But all the reasons to be excited about this team very much exist. And now you get into the woods a little bit. Who's going to be the X factor? Is there going to be Hutcherson? Is it going to be Hawkins? Is it going to be Bolt? Can Omar Payne step forward? There's a lot of fun questions there. And I think that'll make for a couple fun exhibition games. And I think as you get into the early part of the season, some of those details and nuggets will come out. And
I can't wait for the Benjamins, Bossmans, Verdonk. I can't wait for that 12-point game.
Oh, I like to imagine him tearing the whole rim off the sanction is kind of where I land here. We saw him, to be fair, he still is a very large human being. Like, at some point, I do think like if basketball doesn't pan out, can Brett Bielema go across the street? I don't even know where you use this. Did you use him as like a tight end? Can we project him? Where do you project him on the football field?
He'd be a tight end. Or an edge rusher. I don't know if he's got the athleticism for an edge rusher, but yeah, 6'8", 235, 240 pounds. I'd line him up. Sit him next to Moses Akpala coming off the bus, man. That's all you need.
The enforcers.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
Were you shocked?
Really, though, yeah.
Were you shocked at all by anything in the Big Ten media poll that came out? Derek and I went over our results. We both had Illinois. And maybe Scott Ritchie and I were being homers. But Dylan Burkhart, who covers Michigan, had Illinois first as well. And I talked with Goodman, had him second behind Purdue. And those are the two teams I was deciding between. Michigan, number 1, with 13 first place votes. Purdue, number 2, 12 first place votes. Illinois, number 3, just slightly ahead of Ohio State, which I don't mind. Because, like, if Ohio State didn't lose Dwayne Washington, I might have had them 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. Anything surprise you about that top 4 that is clearly the top 4?
No, I mean, could Illinois have gotten more than 3 first place votes? I think that's reasonable, right? To think that like only 3 people really, but again, like we just talked about, look at what they lost. And if you're on the outside looking in, you think they lost Io, who was really, really stinking good. And they lost Adam Miller. Who, am I missing someone?
Georgie, yeah. I mean, outsiders might think that, Georgie was a big loss and they might not know that Omar Payne. Now that's our job to figure out like what they have coming in. But yeah, like I don't mind that people wouldn't have Illinois first. I was more surprised that Purdue was not picked to finish first. I get the Michigan talent, but they lost a ton. I mean, you talk about a lottery pick in Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers, is a high draft pick. Their point guard, Mike Smith, was phenomenal. And I know they got Devontae Jones in, who should be a big impact. Eli Brooks, they really like, but is Eli Brooks any better than Trent Frazier, who's coming back? You know what I mean? Like, so Hunter Dickinson's great. That program has so much talent, so much 5 stars coming in. I wouldn't want them in March, right? I wouldn't want to play them in March. But over 20 Big Ten games, I think Purdue or Illinois are a likelier team to get 15 plus wins.
We're talking about like how significant we are projecting the Andre Curbelo jump to be. Jaden Ivey is in a very similar situation, right? Like
I'm all aboard that train though.
I know, and you should be. And again, when I say this, I'm not saying it like, oh, geez, what a foolish thing to think. I just, man, like that's just part of, it's weird because we got in this habit of one and done where it's like, you almost forget what that leap looks like year over year. Here in Champaign, obviously, we've seen it with Kofi and Io, and all of that's reasonable. But Yeah, at Purdue, I was a little surprised, I guess, that they weren't number one, because it feels like they've been kind of the talk of the conference basketball wise, for what people project them to be. And obviously Matt Painter is a brilliant genius, right? I mean, he's just a really good coach. So they've got a lot of the pieces. I know there are some ruffled or feathers ruffled a little bit. People had Illinois ranked sixth, right? It was one of them fifth or sixth. That's probably low. I mean, let's just objectively call that what it is.
Illinois should not be below Maryland or Michigan State or Indiana. Like,
no.
I wouldn't understand that. Let's get into that group. Like Ohio State, again, I think I was considering them above Michigan. Like, I think they're really good, and I think EJ Liddell is great. But Maryland, Michigan State, Indiana was my next tier, Joey. I think I had Maryland, Indiana, Michigan State, but that sounds right. And then it's Rutgers, Iowa, Wisconsin. I think teams that are going to be fighting for an NCAA tournament, but might only be one bid, teams that lost a lot from last season. I'd probably have Steve Peichel and Rutgers. I think I had them 8 and Wisconsin 9. Like, Iowa's got a lot to replace. Bohannon's back, Keegan Murray's back, but Frederick's gone, Wieskamp's gone, Garza's gone. I think I had them pretty clearly number 10 in mine, even though I think they're going to be a tough out on some nights.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Quickly about Ohio State, like we talk about like these regional bubbles we find ourselves in, right? And I know in Champaign, this is maybe against the law to say. Are people talking about EJ Liddell enough? I mean, seriously, this dude is really, really good.
He was my number 2 pick in all Big Ten. I had Kofi, Liddell, Hunter Dickinson.
I just feel like you hear, and again, maybe it's just because of how we consume and just being so dialed into what we are doing every day. Well, I just don't feel like I hear enough about EJ Liddell. Maybe I'm not going to the right places, which is entirely likely because you don't have a lot of time sometimes to dive into all of that. But man, he's a guy, like, similar to Kobe, that he raises the floor in a really meaningful way.
He's going to be a heck of a second round value, isn't he? Next year, like some NBA team takes him second round. I think they're getting a heck of a value. Nebraska 11th. I think I could have considered them 10th. They got some talent. Just they're replacing. I think Delano Banton leaving maybe a little bit earlier than we thought, though he was a second round pick, hurt them a little bit. And then you get Northwestern, Penn State, Minnesota. It's just not enough talent there and too much to overcome. So I wasn't shocked by a lot of this. I was surprised Michigan got the most first place votes. And I thought Illinois would have gotten some of those. I thought Purdue was going to win, be the favorite coming in. Just because Iowa replacing Iowa, I think outsiders means a lot, and it is. And maybe we aren't valuing that enough, but I think we know they got another star guard waiting in the wings.
Yeah. Again, I understand why you would look at that from the outside and say, oh boy, losing Io, because yeah, man, like the same reason we were thinking like how good the team could be when he came back.
Oh boy, they're losing Franz and Livers and Mike Smith. You know what I mean?
Yeah, great point.
Shawnee Brown, like 4 of the top 5 players.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So it's wild. Real quickly, I want to circle back to Media Day if we can.
Yes.
Did you hear what Hunter Dickinson said?
It took us this long to figure it out. I loved it.
Yes,
I enjoyed the heck out of Hunter Dickinson. Yes. I love that he is willing, and he seems like he likes it. He is relishing being kind of this bad boy. And you know what? The other opposite of it is Illinois players aren't afraid to do it with Michigan or Iowa. I love it. Like Iowa coming out last year or 2 years ago and saying, we don't like them. We respect them, but we don't like them. Like, we want to beat them. Thank you. Bring some of this old school, like, it's okay. Like, PR people, you don't have to just not say anything. Like, as long as you're not disrespectful, as long as you say, hey, Illinois is good, but we don't like them. We want to beat them. They're our rival. Like, I love that. I love that he's prodding Illinois fans, because you know what? That's going to be must-see TV on January 14th and then February 27th when they go to Ann Arbor. That's great for college basketball. It's great for those programs. And it's going to sell tickets. So you can thank Hunter Dickinson for that. Not that I know Illinois, Michigan didn't need any more prodding here, but it just makes it better. It makes it fun. Rivalries are here. And as long as you're not being really, really disrespectful, which this is all in fun, right? I think Hunter's just having fun with all of this. Bring it on. This is good for college sports.
100%. Thank you, Hunter Dickinson. That was It is fun, man. Like we talked about the big thing is when the one and dones really swept through everything. And obviously it's still sweeping through, right? But
Right.
it was like, oh, the rivalries aren't there. Like, you only see them for a year and then they're gone. And that's true. But now when players come back, dude, that is so fun. Say what you mean, man. It is so painfully boring for us to sit in interviews and hear people say like, oh, we got to rebound better and we probably should make some free. That's freaking boring. It's so boring.
Yeah,
So,
well, like EJ Liddell, come out and say it. Come out and say like, yeah,
man,
I get up to play Illinois. Look at my stats. Can you tell that like there's a little bit more edge when I play my home state team that I was still learning Brad Underwood's name, like still building a relationship. Go for it. Like if you like, why not? Like there's nothing wrong with that. So I hope it continues. Great point. The Big Ten has a lot of veterans, right? And I know college basketball does, but think of all the guys that are coming back that just maybe 5 to 10 years ago would have left. Like Hunter Dickinson would have left like a couple years ago, would have felt like, and been like BJ Mullins. You see him for 1 year, but do you really remember him all that much? No, Hunter Dickinson is memorable going into a year too. Ayo Dosunmu the same way, Kofi Coburn the same way. So I think that's great for college athletics to get these guys back, to have these rivalries. EJ Liddell, to be a guy you hated playing against. Why do people hate Aaron Kraft? Because you kept playing him over and over again, and he kept winning, right? And that's the other part of this. Illinois doesn't tick people off unless they're winning. And that's what's fantastic. Like this Iowa-Illinois thing, give me 4 more of those games. I wish we had 4 more with Garza and Ayo Dosunmu. Not going to be quite the same, but there's an edge in those games. Like Michigan this year in those 2 games, and hopefully we get another one in the Big Ten tournament. It's going to be so much fun. So kudos to Illinois for ruffling some feathers because they're good now.
Yeah, man. It's the same. Brad Davison's the guy Illinois fans freaking hate because they've seen him every year for 4 years. You can go back to some of these Duke, you can call them Billings, right? Grayson Allen, JJ Redick, because they terrorize you once or twice a year for 4 years, and you hate to see it, and it's fun. And say what you mean, man. We got a nice dose of that yesterday, I thought, outside of the podium, prepared statements, really. And when you get to these one-on-ones, which were kind of poorly set up this year, man, just say what you mean, man. Like Andre Curbelo, what a great quote. I'm not afraid to say we're going to be better than last year. Don't be afraid to say that, man. Put it out there. If that's what you mean, if that's what you feel, heck yeah, that's fun. That makes it so we weren't driving back yesterday, or even after or it really could have been probably put together better. We still had moments of that because, like, oh, people said what they thought they were going to say, and that was a good time. And it's something we've gotten a little further away from that, especially in college athletics, where you're prepped on, hey, they're going to ask you this, and then they do it in the NFL too. Just say what you want to say, man. Have a good time with it. If you ruffle some feathers along the way, good. It's going to be fun. Maybe DeMonte Williams is face to face with somebody again this year because tensions are high. And guess what? People love it. They love it. It's a blast.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little Illinois football preview. Saturday's homecoming game against Wisconsin. Can Illinois pull off a second straight home upset of the Badgers? We'll talk about that next on the Illini Inquirer Podcast. All right, Joey Wagner, we have an Illinois football game Saturday, homecoming. Man, we've had a lot of home games here, and it's been 7 straight weeks with an Illinois football game. And Illini coming off a win. They started October off right. Now it's an opportunity to potentially make a statement after a couple really heartbreaking Big Ten losses to Maryland and Purdue last month. You get a little bit of a wounded, a little bit of a vulnerable Wisconsin team that is 1-3, 0-2 in the Big Ten. Illinois actually above Wisconsin in the Big Ten standings right now. But I think there's a qualifier. The 3 losses are to Notre Dame, are to Michigan, right? Like they have 3 ranked losses. Penn State is the other one. So they have had the toughest schedule in the country so far, and their defense remains really, really good. Jim Leonard is too good to be a defensive coordinator in college football, and Wisconsin is lucky to still have him. But the offense, like Illinois', has been awful, and they've actually been worse than Illinois because they turn the ball over a lot. So just initial reactions, what do you think of the Illinois-Wisconsin matchup?
Man, and our previews and picks, which are out now, I really came close. I don't know why. It's one of those stupid gut feelings that you have. You're like, oh, maybe they do this. Because Wisconsin's offense just doesn't impress me even at all right now. And they don't have that offensive line that they've had forever that you think, I don't know, like Owen Carney's playing pretty well. The defensive line, could they maybe wreak some havoc? Can the offense make plays? And that's where I stopped. That's just where I stopped. And the thing Illinois does best is run the football. It turns out no one can do that against Wisconsin. Now, I think Brett Bielema is going to try to shoehorn this into the game plan because, well, you haven't really passed at all effectively or well or efficiently or anything that would qualify as good. You've not been able to do that. So I think your best thing is, good Lord, can we find something on the ground here? And the answer is probably no, or at least not in any way that is efficient, especially from a yards per carry standpoint. I mean, you can ask Michigan about that. It took them 44 to get to 112. And Michigan can run the ball pretty well. Like, if you look at that, you're like, oh boy, that's
just say Michigan's a better rushing attack, right?
Yeah.
But and Blake Corum's probably faster than Chase Brown, right? Like, they probably have a better running back room and definitely a better offensive line, better passing attack, and they still struggle to get yards. And think of Notre Dame that came into this year, Joey, with one of the best running back duos in the country, and Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree. They had 3 rushing yards on 32 carries. Now, I'm sure sacks are a part of that, but still, like, that group can't get going against this Wisconsin defense. Like, a lot of these points that Wisconsin is giving up are interception returns for touchdowns or special teams touchdowns.
Yeah, I think it was like 39 yards before you factor in the sacks for Notre Dame, and which is still not very good at all. But you look at that, and I look at that as a little bit of a blueprint, right? Because the Notre Dame passing attack, though it's better than Illinois, I would never argue otherwise, still doesn't really scare you that much. And I'm sure Jim Leonard's heart's beating out of his chest out of excitement. He's like, we can just put everybody in the box and make them make a throw. See you there. Can't wait, right? I mean, that's should be exciting for a defensive coordinator to know that you do the thing well, to defend the thing well that they do well. And Brandon Peters has to make throws. He doesn't have to, like, 6 or 7 shot plays. I don't think that's going to happen. But you got to, like, 3rd and 8, you got to move the chains, dude. You got to make a pass that moves the chains, keeps this thing moving a little bit. And not to keep your defense off the field. Frankly, that's a better matchup, right? The Illinois defense versus Wisconsin offense. But you've got to sustain something. You've got to get yourself down, at least for James McCourt to get somewhere close. I do have this alternative universe where it's like 7 o'clock. I don't even know if he goes to Cam's, but the Stone Cold music hits and he walks into Cam's fresh off another walk off. It's probably not going to happen, but I like to imagine that as a possibility going into this. But man, dude, this is a tough task for Illinois, and we're going to learn. We don't have much more to learn about Brandon Peters. That's silly to say, but what's Brett going to do if this passing attack struggles and you can't run the ball? Do you try to find a spark with Art Sikowski, right? I mean, do you go that route?
I think Wisconsin is better than their record, right?
Agreed.
I think they're better than 1-3. I think they'll probably lose 2 or 3 more games. Like, that would be the most. I think they lose the rest of the way. Like, I don't see this team going 5-7. They're going to be a bowl team, and I think towards the end of the year they could be 2nd or 3rd, right, in the Big Ten West. I think Iowa is clearly the top team there, but they are vulnerable. Like, this is the worst Wisconsin team we've seen in a while, and for Illinois, that's a great thing because they've lost 10 of 11. Their offense is atrocious. Graham Mertz, the stat I got on Graham Mertz is just ridiculous. Okay. It's the Illinois game last year, 20 of 21 for 248 yards and 5 touchdowns. Okay. Since then, Mertz 55.7% completion percentage. Illinois would love that, by the way, for 1,671 yards. That's under 6 yards per attempt, which is bad. 6 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Okay. And he has been awful, just awful since that game. And I think Wisconsin would like to have Jack Cohn back, right? They saw that probably head to head. He left last week's game with an injury, but he's expected back. He was practicing this week. And just like Illinois, it seems like they have no faith in their backup options because they should probably make a change if they did. The other part of this is the Wisconsin offensive players, the receivers and tight ends, have kind of had career days with you. Jake Ferguson, in 3 games against Illinois, 15 receptions, 211 yards, 5 touchdowns. 5 of his 10 career touchdowns are against Illinois. Joey, what do you like to say about Jake Ferguson?
He should probably give Lovey half of his check when he goes pro, right? I mean, I was going to say over under 3.5 versus Illinois highlights when this guy gets drafted.
It depends on how high he gets drafted. How many highlights are there?
How many highlights are there? Yeah. Oh God,
I would say 50% of the highlights are against Illinois. Like he's a player otherwise, but he's a great player against Illinois.
I just remember thinking, driving back from Madison, I guess the next day we got a hotel that night. They kicked us out of the press box like 13 seconds after the game ended to save COVID or something. So do you remember? He's like the toast of college football, right? Like it was like, holy crap, Wisconsin's finally got a quarterback. Oh, sweet God, this is the guy. And whoo, and then you just see highlights of all the Illinois defenders trying to keep up with the wide open Wisconsin skill players after Graham Mertz has thrown it all over the yard. You thought, dang, dude, like this guy, if Wisconsin has a quarterback to go with everything else, good night, see you later, enjoy Indianapolis in November. But that just hasn't happened. And I will say, I like that Aaron Henry, this coaching staff has really done a good job of being like, hey, the pass, that was one thing, at least to the media. We don't know what happens in the Smith Center, but at least to us, it was, I wasn't here, man. I don't know. That was all I know about what's going forward, the whole thing. Aaron Henry was like, nah, man, I wanted to make sure that they knew what happened. And now I don't think he's like screaming Graham Mertz's name every time in practice where a play breaks down. I don't think it comes to that.
2021. Screaming it.
I do think it's pretty telling that he made sure to bring that up at least once, right? We know at least once. So use that, man. I mean, I don't know how much it might help you because Graham Mertz has just really turned out to not be very good. And the Illinois defense has really found itself in the last 3 weeks. I think as much as we understandably criticize the offense, I guess more notably the passing game, right? The defense has really taken a very significant step forward. And we were coming back from Charlottesville, Jeremy. I know I've said this probably on here before. We were like, would you ever run against Illinois again? Not because Illinois was so stout, because like you get free yards in the air in that game against Virginia. And Ryan Walters, we've thrown as many flowers at him as we could. Just an impressive turnaround for this group. And that's what gives me a little bit, who would have ever thought, man, who would have thought 3 years ago, 2 years ago, last year, where you would say the matchup you prefer is to have the Illinois defense against this Wisconsin offense? Who would have thought that? Seriously.
Well, and here's why you can have some hope, right? Going into this game, Illinois opened as 8-point underdogs, now 11-point underdog. I think that's a better line. Like I think that's the more realistic line, because your path to success you did 2 years ago, right? Your path to success, Wisconsin has struggled with. Like this has been the path to beating Wisconsin the last couple of years. Is they turn the ball over. Unlike previous Wisconsin teams, they've lost 10 of their last 19 games. They're 9-10 over their last 19 games, starting with that Illinois loss. And they turn the ball over a lot, and their offense just doesn't put up a lot of points. They're just not a very explosive offense. Like this offensive line is not very good. I think Illinois might have the offensive line edge, both in pass protection and run blocking. Like Wisconsin is awful protecting Graham Mertz this year, and he is awful throwing under pressure. And then their rushing attack is not any better than Illinois' right now. So that's where, like, if you get takeaways, right? Wisconsin, in their 3 losses, 11-2 turnover discrepancy. They've turned the ball over 11 times and have only gotten 2 takeaways. Illinois, the last couple games, Joey, 6 takeaways to 2 turnovers for them. So that's been why they've been in games and had a chance despite their offense stinking. And let's go back to that Wisconsin game 2 years ago. Is Brandon Peters was awful for 3.5 quarters. He had 1 or 2 great drives, 3 great throws that he made. They made plays and they got a touchdown. Was that to Josh Bebe, right? And then
the Donnie Navarro game, the breakout, right? Yeah. He ran down the field.
Yeah, so they had 2 big plays that way, and then he made a throw to Casey Washington, I believe 1 to Daniel Barker, big conversions. That's what they need. Like, I'm not expecting Brandon Peters to outplay Graham Mertz, but can he have fewer turnovers than Graham Mertz? That's going to be key for the defense, is to get some takeaways from Mertz. And I think a big reason why Brandon Peters is playing, because he doesn't turn the ball over, because we know Art Sikowski will. But can he make a few key third down conversions? Can he make one or two big plays? We're not asking for 4 touchdowns, right? But can you convert that one pass to Deuce Spann or to Carlos Sandy, right? Or that big third down the seam to Daniel Barker or Luke Ford? Those are the throws that have to be made, that prolong drives, that keep Wisconsin off the field. And then your defense is going to have to get some takeaways. I think the defense has shown enough that you can be confident they're going to give the offense a chance. So maybe Wisconsin breaks out with 31 points or 30 plus points this week, but I don't think they're very good. And I think Ryan Walters' crew has at least shown enough consistency now that we can think they're going to hold this in the 20s, right? And I think they're going to give them a chance. It's does Brandon Peters and the offense make enough plays to give them a chance to win at the end of games?
Remember it was like 3 days ago, the Monday press conference, both Brett Bielema and Tony Peterson said something interesting that I kind of am coming back to is when we talked about those deep plays, it was, hey, we might tweak something in practice, but I don't know what that something is. And I wish I had asked, and I certainly will if they can hit on them. But what is that, right? Like, is that something where you don't need a lot of them, dude? You just don't. You need one or two to at least make Jim Leonard get some dudes out of the box. Like, you need that so much against a team that stops the run and is going to be dedicated to encouraging you to pass the ball. You've just got to hit a couple of those. So what are those tweaks? I'm not that football savvy. I don't know what that could be.
Well, talking with Jay Lehman earlier in the week, and I highly encourage, if you don't have VIP membership, sign up for it to get Jay's insight. Just going over some of the film, like some of the deep throws, Brandon's just not leading his guy to the wide open space, right? He's kind of throwing it behind a guy where he's got to kind of go to the middle of the field, and that allows defenders to kind of catch up. He needs to lead these guys, and he's not doing that right now. So I don't know what that tweak is in practice, right?
Yeah,
like, how do you set that up to where it's like, hey, Brandon, throw there? Like, you can't throw up the middle or to the side. And we saw Art Sikowski do that with Deuce Spann on one. He was streaking down the field and he threw to the other side instead of leading him to the open part of the field and kind of giving his guy a chance to make the catch. So I don't know. Like, he was close. Like, there were some, I give Tony Peterson a lot of credit. I think the last couple of weeks he's opened things up. I think he's adjusted to his personnel. And against Charlotte, especially, I thought Tony Peterson had a good game against obviously a worse opponent, but there were plenty of opportunities. Like, Illinois should have scored 38 or 45 points, and the quarterback just missed the plays.
I've said this theory a lot, and we should also mention Wisconsin doesn't record a lot of takeaways defensively. Yeah. I mean, they just don't do that. And I'm not reporting this theory, but it's something I keep coming back to because that is, and we talked about this in the post-game pod for Charlotte. I think part of the thing they really like about Brandon Peters is the fact that he does not really turn the ball over, which is a good
career. Like Illinois, like that is one thing he's done incredibly well outside of the one play against Maryland where they really couldn't afford it. He's done incredibly well at taking care of the ball, but he also has just not made plays.
And so I think what their line, again, this is just my theory, what their logic is our running game is going to give us enough bias and time. Our defense is going to keep us in games, and eventually he's going to hit. Like, that is the only thing I can think about. And I'm not projecting it happens against Wisconsin, but you saw it get a little closer last week. And maybe that was good and bad for people who want to see Art Sikowski. Good that you didn't hit it, and that's more reason to go to Art, or bad because last week was about as close as I can recall some of those shot plays coming to fruition from Brandon Peters. So eventually my guess is they think it's going to happen. I mean, that's about some of the only reason, but it would.
The reason I can't predict a win is because I haven't seen it for
exactly. It's exactly right.
Starts. It's had 7 starts. I guess early Iowa game, Brandon had a fantastic first quarter, but those 5 quarters of the Nebraska game and the Iowa game is the last time we really saw Brandon make a bunch of plays. Now, I did like last week using his legs. I thought that was good, but there were just reads you got to make, and you have to make these throws. You can't hesitate. You got to be confident. And if Brandon turns it over because it goes off his wide receiver's hands, or his receiver doesn't turn around in time, that's not on him. Like, I think he's got to realize that, like, I got to do my job, and I got to trust, even if they haven't earned that trust, I got to trust that my tight ends and wide receivers are going to make the play. if I put the ball in the right spot. Maybe outsiders blame us, and that's on us to figure that out, right? As media members, what happened that play, what went wrong. It's why I like having Jay Lehman to help us through those things. But he's got to trust that those guys are going to do their jobs, because otherwise he can't do his job. And the last couple of weeks he has not.
I think it's becoming clear to me, and we haven't talked to Brandon since before the Nebraska game, which I understand he was hurt for some stretches. It's becoming clear to me that Casey is the guy he might trust the most, Casey Washington. And I understand why. I mean, in those little 8-yard, 9-yard routes where he doesn't have to, really beat a cornerback per se down the field, he's pretty stable, right? He's a strong kid. He's got nice hands. He can get over there and make it. He's a tough kid. But outside of that, I do wonder who does he trust?
And isn't that the difference with Art? Like when we saw Art in the game, like he had maybe too much trust at times in his receivers. And hey, let's be honest, like Art puts the ball in danger. And he missed some real throws that he needed to make, especially against UTSA, to win that game. But he kind of just give those guys a chance. Like he'd just be like, hey, let's make a play. And he's certainly got that personality. Would be like, hey, I believe in you. Hey, let's go. Yeah. All right. So I think you got to see a little bit of that at Brandon. Like you just need to see some life. And I think trusting what's happening around him is important, even if, again, the pass protection has not earned his trust, right? And the wide receivers have not earned their trust. But he hasn't earned the trust of those other guys either by just making some plays as a quarterback. Like the difference between him and Chris Reynolds last week was clear. Like Chris was making plays to give Charlotte a chance to win that game. And it felt like, if Illinois needed to rely on its quarterback last week, they weren't winning that game.
The thing that when we've heard, and we asked Brett about it on Saturday, on Monday, we asked Tony on Monday, is this notion, I mean, all we can call it is a notion, right? We've not been to practice, that he's being more aggressive. His word, aggressive, with Brandon. Well, does that mean he's getting on him more? That's what it sounds like, right?
I saw that last week against Charlotte with Bielema. Yeah. And I saw it against, was it for the Maryland or no, it was the Purdue game. Coming out of halftime, Bielema was all over him coming out of halftime, but it hasn't resulted in a benching, right? So clearly,
what does that tell you about Art?
Yeah, you said that in the last post game. I thought that was relevant. I think they like Art. I don't think they trust him, right? It's just Brandon hasn't earned that trust either, in my opinion. So I don't know what that point is. You got a bye week before Penn State. If Brandon doesn't get anything going, is it halftime? Is it after the game? But it feels like this should be the last opportunity. Like I thought that maybe last week, but for this staff, how much longer can you go with this without getting the football in the end zone via the pass? Like the Daniel Barker play notwithstanding, like they need more consistency out of their quarterback to make plays. And I don't know what that breaking point is, because I thought we would have hit it already.
Yeah, man. Then the other side of that coin is, oh boy, do you really want to send Art into Happy Valley for his first start since the Virginia game? I mean, it's not.
Gonna have to score some points against Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look narrative wise, like, oh boy, that's a big thing for put Art out there. But man, Brandon is go ahead.
Yeah, can we bring up? What if Brandon does break through?
That's what I was gonna say. Brandon, and
I don't see it happening. To be honest, I don't see it. But like, what if he does have 6 first down throws? Right, maybe completes like 12 of 20 passes, 2 touchdowns, doesn't turn it over, but has a bunch of first down throws, and Illinois has a chance. I don't know if Illinois wins, but has a chance to win. Like, you stick with him, right? Like, obviously, you'd probably stick with him.
Brandon, what we know, and I know it's hard for a lot of people to watch because he doesn't always show it on the field. I can probably count on one or a couple times he's shown it in the game. He's a competitive dude, man. Brandon is super. At some point, I keep thinking, is he going to get so mad that Bielema is on him like this? That
I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
I agree with the last year Nebraska, right? That game.
Scoreboard, the whole operation.
Right.
That was like this, more of this, dude.
The Cal game, right? Like you saw some fire there, and his teammates talked about like how he might not emote it a lot, but there's a competitive fire. I got to be frankly, Joe, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I agreed. I'm
I
not
haven't seen it
saying like,
lately. Like that's where like I would disagree. Where does he have? Okay, show me that. Like I think this team would love to see. I think these coaches would love to
I
see.
think that's what Brett's trying to get out of him, right?
Yeah, they're trying to tick him off, like to where it's like we need that emotion right now. Like that's why I keep using the word lifeless with this offense. And I know he can be seen as hammering on Brandon Peters. Listen, he's a 24-year-old, 6-year starting quarterback who's a Big Ten starting quarterback. You're going to get criticized. You're going to get picked apart like this, right? And we haven't been able to talk to him to get his side of this thing. But like the offense has just been lifeless with him. And even if Art makes mistakes, you've seen some life and feel like you have a chance to score some points when he's in the game.
I agree. And I would like to talk to him and understand where he's at. But it's to me, it's very clear that Brett wants that fire out of him. And it's not like we're really reading a crystal ball here, right? I mean, he talked about this through the spring and through
Tony
training
Peterson
camp,
mentions it all the time,
the
like
whole 9 yards.
unlike any quarterback I've ever had,
I don't
and
think
every
that's
quarterback I've had that's been successful is emotional, he's a leader, like, and Brandon is not that, which is why, to be honest with you, it's been surprising how long they've stuck with him.
because Art is all of those things.
Yes.
Now, what Art is not is as good as the quarterback as Brandon, right? I mean, maybe, right? I think if you were to look at Madden traits, right? Brandon would have the arm strength, the whole operation in front of him.
How much is like they keep mentioning the arm strength thing. I saw Art throw the ball pretty far.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, it wasn't always accurate, but he's been better on deep balls. Like he's been more accurate on deep balls. Art's big. Art isn't, I think Brandon's a better athlete, but is it that much of a, like that's where
with what you need.
I don't buy it. Like I don't buy the whole talent thing as much. I think Brandon's got a little bit more talent. He's had a little bit more success maybe, but the last couple of years he certainly hasn't. And I think those leadership qualities matter. The staff seems to think they really matter. And I just think at some point, Brandon's got to produce more. Like Art produced more with the same supporting cast around him. So that's what I just disagree with them a little bit on this. Like Brandon's certainly more talented. Like haven't seen it on the field this year.
Yeah, totally fair. Right. I mean, maybe they think he's closer to breaking through. I don't know. I just don't know.
Show that then against a defense, you need to do it, right? Like this has got to be the breaking point for all.
It does. And here's the thing, Wisconsin, I mentioned, they are going to welcome you to throw the ball, right? Like they're just going to encourage you to do it, and you got to do it. You've just got to do it for a game that really, I mean, look, this isn't like a turning point in the season. Okay. Like the season is what the season is, but if you can sneak this one out, if you're Illinois, we talked all last week about what happens if they lose to Charlotte, goodness gracious. What happens if they beat Wisconsin? If you can sneak this out, and it does suck you got Penn State coming off a bye. That's not the ideal 1-2 punch there.
Then you got winnable games, like Rutgers can't score.
Very winnable games ahead of you. Yeah. And very much a chance to regain some of this lost momentum. The Penn State game probably notwithstanding, right? Like
Penn State and Iowa probably not winning.
Yes.
Then you got
you look forward and you can see a Rutgers, a Northwestern, and a Minnesota team that if you have the confidence, like, hey, we beat Wisconsin, I don't care if they're 1-3. This is still Wisconsin. It always is going to be Wisconsin. Brett Bielema is a part of the reason they're always going to be Wisconsin. If you can do that, then you got a little swagger back, right? I mean, understanding what's probably going to happen in 2 weeks, where you have that whole bye week of, man, we've won 2 in a row, one of which was against Wisconsin. To do that, I think Brandon has to play well, in which case now you got a little, maybe your quarterback's feeling it a little bit more, right? Like I don't think there's a way they beat him without Brandon playing
well. Yeah.
Mediocre, above average, anything along those lines. I don't think he's got to throw it around for 300, right? But I think he's just got to make good, smart throws. Then now you got a little bit something to build on. And some of these, hey, we're closes, maybe you buy that a little more as a fan base. And I hate to say,
I mean, you just get some excitement, and I think it would be huge in recruiting if you could beat a team like this. And then for confidence and learning how to win those close games. I do think there's something to that, like learning how to close out games.
100%.
They got to figure out how to do that right now. And I think the quarterback is a big reason for that. I will say this, like the defense had a couple opportunities to do that and weren't able to. I think they could, like, can they have a dominant performance where they hold Wisconsin to under 14 points or 15 or under, right? Like it's not outside the realm of possibilities, because I think Owen Carney's playing his best ball. I think the safeties are playing their best ball. Do you get Devin Witherspoon and Jake Hansen back? We don't know. Sounds like they're game time decisions. They probably know now. Thursday, they had a meeting with the doctors, and the doctors probably cleared them or not this week. Seth Coleman being out certainly doesn't help, but I think Isaiah Gay has played well the last couple of weeks.
Owen Carney, man.
Yeah, he's playing extremely well. They're lining him up everywhere. 4.5 sacks the last 3 weeks. And he's been consistently getting pressure most of the season. I think you're starting to see now Keith Randolph being healthy is huge for them up front. Johnny Newton is a little inconsistent, but you see the flashes out of him. Roderick Perry's playing pretty well. I think the front is playing well. Tariq Barnes is filled in well. That's why if they can get Jake Hansen back, I think it'd be so important, especially against Jake Ferguson in this rushing attack, because Wisconsin doesn't terrify you, but I didn't think they did last year going into this game. So the defense has to be good for Illinois to have a chance, just because of what Wisconsin's defense brings.
Yeah, I had something I probably lean a little bit. This is just a guess towards Jake Hansen. I would lean a little more towards seeing him because he went through warm-ups. Like that's our body of work we have to evaluate here. And Devin Witherspoon came out in a bucket hat. We never saw him wear pads, right? And maybe that means nothing. Maybe Brett Bielema is sitting in his office laughing hysterically at that somebody has the thought of that it matters. Well, that's what I've got to work with, and I assume that matters. So getting Jake back would be a big deal, right? I mean, he's playing pretty good football here. But, man, I don't know, Jeremy.
We focus on the quarterback for a reason, right? Like he has to be.
I have one. Look, I was talking to somebody else about this earlier this week. I think to me, this is the level of football that you have to have one in the biggest way, right? Like in high school, you can put the best athlete in the school back there, and they're going to probably make most of these kids miss who are going to go on to not play football ever again in their life. In the NFL, I know there's some really crappy quarterbacks in the league, but you know where they were really good quarterbacks? College. Like you have to have a good one in college, period. Like you can't hide from that.
And Wisconsin is one of the few teams, despite last year's result, where it's not that big of a high of a bar to leap to have a better quarterback, right? Like Graham Mertz has been awful. He's arguably been worse than Brandon Peters this year. So listen, I would take Graham Mertz tomorrow to have a better day, but you're not asking for a lot. And I'm saying just to be competitive in this game and have a chance to win like you did against Purdue and Maryland and see where the chips fall, right? See who executes a little bit more. But we know what the blueprint is. We saw it 2 years ago. We saw Brandon Peters make just enough throws with an opportunistic defense, a solid rushing attack. That's the blueprint this year. And I feel confident the rushing attack can do enough. The defense can do enough to give you a chance. And nothing we've seen the last 3 weeks gives you confidence in the quarterback, and that's what has to change.
Before, I know we've been talking forever here, but I do want to ask you this because I don't think we're going to have time probably on Saturday to touch on this. And I know in your story with Josh Whitman, this was discussed, and we've discussed it with Brett, but how much is there to say about being competitive and close in these, right? I mean, I think a good amount. I do think that. I don't ask that to say, like, is this really a big deal? Because I think it is. But how big of a deal is it, right? To not – I mean, obviously, no one enjoys watching you get skunked 63-0 or watching Graham Mertz literally probably tell them what he was going to do and do it. But I understand, like, the other side of that is for fans, this stings like heck, dude. This stings. And every last thing is reasonably and understandably questioned. But I don't want to be like the at least they're playing close guy. But there is something to, because we just haven't seen that in Champaign for a while.
No, I agree. I mean, I think if most people, if you told most Illini fans, like, Illinois is going to be within a touchdown. Like, if they said at the end of the day, it's 24-21, Wisconsin win. That's a pretty good day, right? Like, for where you are in your program, yeah, it'd be disappointing if you lost a lead late or whatever it is. Like, but it's Wisconsin. And I know Wisconsin's weaker this year, but it's not Maryland, it's not Purdue, right? Like those felt like, man, and Maryland, the defensive performance was so encouraging. It's just the offense was so discouraging. Purdue is the same way, right? Like there were building blocks that you can build on if you just fix maybe that offense and the quarterback and wide receiver position. You're not that far away, but yeah, I think there are some moral victories to be had. It'd just be a lot nicer for Brett Bielema to get a real victory and to really have that kind of piece of evidence to his team, to recruits, to the fans, to show that, hey, we are taking strides. And those early setbacks, we don't get there without this, right? Like this win was part of, losing those games. We figured out like what we need to do. And that's part of the growth process that's ugly, right? Is doing that. And Brad Underwood went through that.
Yep.
His first couple of years with such heartbreaking losses.
And eventually you're going to say that, right? Like eventually Brett wants to get this program where he can say, like Brad can say, like we needed to go through that Northwestern game in Evanston on the, we need to go through those things. But if you can move up the timeline of which you say that, right? Like that's always better.
Because you could be 3-0 coming into this game in the Big Ten, right? Like you were so close to being 3-0 coming into this game and thinking, oh my gosh, they could be 5-2.
That's the hard part to reckon with all of this, right? Because I was thinking about that yesterday is like in the Big Ten, right? The run it down, the rough and tumble Big Ten, you were closer than you were against Conference USA and an ACC team. Like I know they had a chance to beat UTSA, but that was not really that close
as the score was, right?
And then obviously Virginia was over before it started, literally before people woke up from their drunken slumber from the night before, like Virginia was over. But like, that's a little weird to me. Like you were, and I understand like the teams you've been close with or Purdue or Maryland, like I get all that, but I don't know. It's kind of a tough thing because you want, like, I think people, as much as they're upset, are still watching. Maybe they're not watching from Memorial Stadium or they're watching every week, right? Whereas if you're getting blown out 63-0, you probably could find something else to do on your Saturday afternoon. But I think the other part of it is it's like, like it's right there. That's so frustrating. It's just 6 weeks, really interesting year. We can talk about it in the bye week, but what an interesting year it's been so far.
All right, good stuff. Thank you, Joey Wagner. We'll talk some more hoops. We get to see a hoops practice on Saturday morning, 8:30 at State Farm Center. And, of course, we will recap the Illinois-Wisconsin game Saturday night, another long day at Memorial Stadium. Big recruiting weekend for both Illinois basketball and Illinois football. So check IlliniInquirer.com for the latest there. As always, thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Give us a follow wherever you get your podcasts. Rate us, review us. That helps us out as well. Everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy the October heat. Hopefully my White Sox fans can enjoy a weekend with a win. That'd be nice. Get me to my Monday game. I have tickets for at what are we, Guaranteed Rate Field now, Joey? I got to remember what we're called. But yes, everyone have a great
still
weekend.
to sell.
I like it. Sox Park is usually what we all call it. Everybody have a great weekend. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.